Hi everyone, welcome to the Ultimate Guide to Darklings. Will be the part 2. So in the last part we started by considering general consideration, why Darklings are so strong. So the fact that they can have priests, convert their priests into spade and 2 points at the same time, ensure that they can score high and they can have a strong economy, and their starting situation make them a possible candidate for cults. Also considered what was a good setup for Darklings, so what faction they want in, what faction they don't want, and especially like how what is important for Darkling, who is so flexible, is to get a lot of coins out of the track, or at least some bonus that they can exploit. So Darklings focus more on cult income rather than a specific event on the track. We consider to what were the bonuses that you want as Darklings. Here today we will start by considering their different starting spots. So where do you want to start as Darkling? As you will see, that's quite a difficult topic. So let's get into it. Alright, so just to give you an overview of the different possible starting spots, and the key hexes that will come with these starts. So the key contested hexes. So you have in the E start, a very popular E start. Often, so the key hexes will be those underlining red. Then there is the possible of starting middle, and in this case those 2 hexes next to it will be very important. The northwest start, in which you have both these kind of 4 hexes that will be important, and the northeast start, where you try to control this area of the board early on, or the southeast start here, where you try to control mainly this area. So we'll go a bit more in depth into these different possibilities in following slides. Alright. So let's start with the most popular start, which is the E start. This is a very safe starting spot. It's often the most popular one because it's easy to play, very, very easy to play. I'll say that it's not my favorite. It's not the most powerful, I think. I think actually you should do the E start only in very specific circumstances. So the E start, the advantage is that you'll get an easy connection through these 2 hexes. You'll probably do 2 towns and then take this key hex here to kind of connect. You may be afraid that engineer, supposing that engineer is in, because, well, usually you don't do an E start if there is no gray faction. So you may be afraid that engineer will take the blue here, but actually engineers really rarely do so. You should be really worried about that only if a red faction or a green faction is in the game also, because otherwise it's not very efficient for NG to go there. He will prefer to go north, and then he has enough hexes to do his town. So it's usually not too much of a hurry to take this hex. However, maybe if you have a spade at some time early in the game where you don't know how to use, you can just use it to turn it black without building on it. Usually you don't want to build on it because it will make your town harder. So usually you'll just turn it into black and not build, and wait for connection later on. And you have here the different hexes. All those hexes will cost you just 1 spade. So another advantage of starting here is that you have many hexes, cheap hexes to build, and you can access all of them without any shipping. So that's pretty convenient. However, often the expansion from there can be harder. So often what you will end up doing is, after taking these hexes, you'll go for the 2 hexes, the 2 spade hexes, and then maybe even for the 3 spade hexes, kind of building all this area. So it can work. Usually it won't lead to a very big network. But it has the advantage of not needing to advance shipping. So if it's really usually more combined with a strategy where you focus on scoring a lot, or code focus. So if you succeed to either transfer it, maybe taking the shipping bonus one time, transfer to this island and build another town here, a third town here, or somewhere in this area build a third town. Then I believe your potential to win the game is much better, but sometimes it can be very hard because especially here it's not rare that someone will beat you to there, especially if mermaid is in the game. And here, if brown is in the game, often you will come here. So it's not always possible, but if you can, it's interesting. It helps your winning chances. So what do you want? What are you looking for the E start? As I said, it's not my favorite, and I think people go for it way too often. Actually, you should go for the E start, all E start in very specific circumstances. Otherwise, we'll see that often the split start, for example, will be better. I'll try to explain why. So, but what kind of circumstances do you go for in all these start? You have to have a gray faction in. I think that's sometimes people think that a green faction can do just the same as a gray, but that's not true, because green is less deep in the island. So meaning that it's much harder for you to build trading posts if he doesn't go around here. And often also green will kind of delay exploiting this area, more focusing on here. Maybe in the end, sometimes green, because he suspects that he will never get this hex anyway. So green can really well decide, because he'll take it. So green will often decide against this to not develop at all here, and that means very little leech spot and very little possibility to upgrade your dwellings to trading posts. So only if a gray faction isn't. And as for me, as I said, I will go for the E start only when there is no yellow faction. So why that? Why is that? The yellow faction is not really interfering much in your development. Well, might take this hex, but it's not the end of the world. But the thing is, if there's a yellow faction, you will almost always start here, and that opens up for you a much better starting spot, I think, which is the northeast one. That's if a yellow faction is in, I'll usually almost always recommend the split start, because split start, or maybe the middle start if Swarmling is here, but not an all east start, because you have more interesting possibilities here. So why will the split start be interesting rather than the E start? Mainly because you have more free hexes. So I'll come back to this in a minute, but just to explain a little bit. You have this black hex, and you have one of those two black hex where you won't start, which will be a free hex early on. So you just have to do digs and you have a free hex. So meaning that you can have a faster development in the beginning. And if you do an all E start, you're probably not planning to win one network anyway. So the fact that the split start is hard to connect is not so much of an issue. Better to go for a better economy and play on something else than network. And sometimes we'll see more in a bit. Sometimes you can connect with even with the E start. So you go for an all E start if there is no yellow faction. And I'd say often when mermaids are in, because mermaids often they start here, meaning that they will stop the center start. If yellow will be here, you could do the E start, but again, let's suppose he's not. So the center start is kind of less good here because it's much harder to town up when mermaids start here. Also, any possibility to kind of do start here, say, except you're not doing a town to go some shipping, can be blocked by mermaid early on, and so it is with this hex. So maybe you say, okay, mermaid is in, and Science is often going this way. Well, I'll start here, you know, to kind of have an head start to on mermaid. Well, the problem is that mermaid might take this hex very fast. So go here, here, and here, which kind of make this spot a lot less good, because then it's a lot harder to build a town and you don't have the free hex that we were hoping to get. So it's kind of a default start, really. Since there is no other good spot around, you decide for the all-east start. Then ideally you don't want a brown faction in, but I'd say that's not a deal breaker. And sometimes if, say, already Mermaid, NG and no yellow faction are in, maybe even if brown is there, that will be the best to do is an all-east start. Of course, I will have like the alternative later on, which will be the southeast start, which has the idea to block this possibility for cultists, because otherwise cultists will probably take these 2 hex and also block any potentiality for you to do a 3rd town. So if you have a game in which there's cultists, mermaids, and engineers, it's not the ideal setup for Darklings. But then probably again you won't start as favorite, but your best chance, your best shot, I think, is going for an all-east start in this kind of setup. Right. Alright, so let's consider the case of the split start that I've already talked a little bit. So this is a start that has grown in popularity a lot during, I would say, the last year about, for very good reason, I think. So the idea is that you start 1 dwelling northwest and 1 dwelling east. I prefer this spot, but I can see reason for this one too. We'll discuss a little bit more about this. And we'll try to see kind of the reason for that. So what you need absolutely to start northeast is a yellow faction, as I said, because you want a neighbor here. Then you can go here with swarmlings, but I prefer not. When swarmlings will be in, I will prefer the center start, where you put a dwelling in the center, because swarmlings almost never start here, so you'll have the opportunity to take this hex. Of course, that's implying that there is no brown faction, but yeah, so you prefer swarming not him to not block the possibility of going here. And here we'll start with games where mermaids are in. We'll consider games where mermaids are not in afterward, but here, since mermaid are here, it's kind of already stopped here, the possibility of the middle start, making the split start even more obvious. The split start can be done, just to complete on mermaids. Mermaids have the problem, so the specificity in game with mermaids when you do the split start is that it's going to be really hard to connect, because mermaid will either, and maybe both, do both of these expansion, kind of blocking your possibility of connecting north, and it's really hard to connect anywhere else than north when you start in the split start. So if mermaids are in, you're probably already quitting on network, on playing for network here, and the idea will be that compared to null east start, well, you have 2 advantage. First, you can reach this hex and reach this hex with only 2 digs, getting a free hex, so it's even better in terms of the quality of cheap hexes around your starting spots, so it's more efficient, and you're not playing to play on network anyway, especially like if there's nomad and say engineers or even dwarves. Those are really faction that will go for network, so you may as well quit on network early on. Then that's also one of the reasons why I prefer this hex rather than this hex. I find that the main advantage of this hex is gives you the possibility to connect, but here you're kind of quitting on connection anyway. And we'll see, even when mermaids are in and you're playing for connection, I still think this hex is better in the split start, and I'll try to explain why. So the other advantage of this hex is that as NG go around on these 3 hexes, it will give you a lot of power. And on the opposite, so that's maybe the reason why the split hex became very, very popular, because this configuration of Darklings, Nomads, Mermaids, Engineers was very, very popular. It was the most kind of played configuration in Snellsman's tournament, at least. And NG had the best of it, because usually people will start, Darklings will start with an all-east start, and if you start with an all-east start and there's a gray faction here, look at how much power you're giving him early on, and the whole game really. So that's kind of really feeds the gray faction, and especially NG, who can do more out of every resources they get than any other faction. So the fact that you go all east, it was giving them a ton of powers, really kickstarting their economy and making them very, very strong throughout the game. And that's the main explanation why NG had such high success rate in this configuration. In the split start, it's the complete opposite. So since you start one dwelling here, you can decide to start upgrading your temple and your sanctuary first on the west, and then develop your town in the west, and not play a single move until like round 4 on the east, really starving NG for power. So as you do that, and while maybe he develops, you are leeching from him. So that's kind of an anti-engineer strategy. The best way to fight another faction in Terra Mystica is not to block him, is not to take away what he wants, is to not give him any power. It's to starve him. And by doing the split start, then Darklings really have the opportunity to starve engineers, and that's really one of the reasons why you want to do this start. So, yeah, as I said, what you can do when NG is in, you can just start doing your sanctuary here, and then doing your town here, and delay as much as possible, giving NG power. So you also want to play on this side of the board first, because that's where the most important hexes will be. So if Nomads, Fakirs are in, these 2 hexes will be very contested. So this hex here, ideally you want it. It will kind of hinder yellow's development if you can get it. If you don't get it though, it's not the end of the world, because you can go through this hex without too much trouble. So ideally you want this hex for the cheap town. If you don't get it, well, at least Nomad will give you a ton of power going there, and then you can still take this hex. As for this hex, it's kind of nice because it opens up the possibility of a third town, an easy third town spot. But so if you can get it early on, it's good. But it's not the end of the world either if you don't get it. You can really well go with a 2-town strategy on this. On these starting spots without too much problem. But ideally you'd like to beat yellow to the north here and do a town there too. Often there will be engineer, there might be mermaids, so there will be some kind of support here for you to do your town there. Alright, so yeah, just to complete, you also have here, so later on, once you have kind of settled things down in the northeast, then you can go around and go to take this cheap hex, and giving NG power, but NG powers that kind of come later in the game, and those are less valuable. So yeah, I think that's the interest of going this way. Alright, so there's another consideration we need to focus on before moving on to the next position, starting position, about the split start, and it's situations where, well, of course you have a green faction, because otherwise you don't do the split start. But situation where there's no blue factions and no green faction, or there is green faction, but there is no sign that they'll get in this area anytime soon. And that's interesting because that will open up another possibility of strategy with the split start, which is to play for network. So you still have the opportunity, the possibility to do a town going this way, as usual. But in these position or in these matchups, what you have more often the possibility to do, well, you can go this way just as in a normal, just as always, but you have the possibility, once you have taken these two hexes, to continue on and arrive there first. Again, it's possible to do it with mermaids, or it's possible to do it with grey factions, but often they will arrive first. If you're in, for any reason, in a split start where one of these factions is there, but for some reason he's not developing fast toward this, Swarmlings, for example, and Swarmlings is not starting here, or Witches who's starting here and here, but with no stronghold and no shipping early on, so maybe you can beat them to there. Then you have this possibility to continue on this area, and even maybe take these two hexes, and then you can connect with this original dwelling here. And the interest of this is that you've done so with only one shipping. So Darklings, if they can play on network without having more than one shipping, is very good for them, because they have always good use for priests. For their faction, usually advancing shipping is just a way to score, not a bad way to score, but for Darklings, really, just using priests to dig is at least as good. So the less you do have to advance shipping, usually, the more interesting it is. So if you can go through here, then it becomes very interesting to have this kind of split start and try to connect your dwellings with only one shipping. Alright, so let's talk about now the center and east start, so where you start a dwelling in the east and one in the center. You'll see, so the big advantage of the center start, I think, is its flexibility. It offers much more opportunity to play on network than the split start. So when it's available, it's interesting because you can have many ways to connect. And that's usually why I prefer to put the second dwelling here rather than here. So here it's more leech, but here it's much more connection opportunity. So the center start, though, one of the big requirements that you'll have is that there is no mermaid in, because mermaid will take this hex, and usually if mermaid take this hex and also block this possibility of connection through here, this dwellings kind of become a bit useless. Again, mermaid might go this way, take this black hex. So I think actually that's often a mistake that Darklings are doing. Should not start here if mermaids is in the game, unless you're really confident that you can take these two hex or these two hex to do a town, so it's very special circumstances, but as a rule of thumb, at least, I would say, don't go center if mermaids are there. Then, because, yeah, but there's two possibilities if you're starting center. If there's no brown faction, you will try to do a sanctuary town in the middle using these three hexes. That means, of course, that if nomads, say, are in the game, this hex is really, really crucial. If yellow is in the game and you choose to start center, I would say this is a crucial hex enough that 90% of the time you dig it with your first move. So even if it means not taking the Earth 1 favor, it's really worth. This hex is that much important. It will give you so much leech, so much opportunity, and the possibility to do a town in the center, so it's worth sacrificing almost always Earth 1 to get it, and I don't hesitate to do it in these circumstances. So yeah, so you want to do the center start, you want a town to be able to do a town with these three spots. Or if, say, brown is in the game and that's not available, you want to at least be able to go all the way here, and sometimes you'll even go all the way there to do a town in this area. So you have to, in other words, I would say you have to be confident you can do a town in this center area to start center. Then The advantage of starting here, it's almost impossible to be beaten to the blue hex, meaning that you'll be able to go around and use this free black hex here. So at some point, so say if it's NG or witches, NG, as I said, usually don't want the blue hex, but if it's witches, you might try to go there fast, and if you're there, you can beat them more consistently than if you start here, because it's just 1 hex away. And the other advantage of this hex will be the possibility of connection. So you can either go with 2 ship, go north, exploiting these 2 free black hex, and then going taking whatever hex you need in order to connect. So maybe it will be the yellow and the black here, maybe it will be the blue here. So it offers you the possibility of connecting north, but it also offers you more possibility to connect south. So as long as, again, brown is not in the game, or is in the game but it didn't start there, because often if you start here, brown will start here. Then you can go, you can move west from there, maybe do a channel here, and have the possibility to connect through this hex or this hex with 3 ships. So that's kind of and that's another advantage of this hex. It's kind of very flexible. You have like a lot of possibility to connect, and because you have a lot of possibility to connect, often you don't have to rush toward connection. So a good way, I think, to play the start is not necessarily commit toward with network too early. You can get some cold presence, take the important hex, build your economy around easy hex in your neighborhood, and just wait, sit there and wait to see, well, will there be any opportunity to connect in this game? And if there is, you can jump on it. But if you see that others have invested some resources to block your connection path, then you can just change your strategy and go for points or go for cult strategy. So this kind of flexibility and disability to delay, I think, is one other and it's one other thing that makes Darklings very strong, and the center start often favor that. So the idea, again, is that you can just delay and see if you commit too fast, say you advance 2 ships and you go there and you go there, it's possible that a faction will invest some resources to block you here. But if you wait, if you see whether it's there or not, maybe you will still invest resources to block you there, but then at least you didn't wasted resources to try to attempt connections. So you can delay, see how it goes, and then try to identify what is the best connection path a bit later in the game. I would say round 4, round 5. Maybe at this moment, for example, you have a huge amount of coins, you are able to pick the past shipping bonus, and that's where you make your move to secure connection. So we can delay, pretend that connection is not really interesting you, you're playing just for pure points in this game, and then when the opportunity comes up, then you can just jump on it. And I think that's an interesting way to play Darklings. Yeah, so that's especially true with the center start. I find it's very, very flexible start. So now what remains to see is a less kind of common starting spot, and we will start with the north and east start. So what kind of circumstances will you go for the north and east start? So you still have 1 dwelling in the east. Usually it will be this one, because one of the idea of the north and east start is kind of having a connection northeast that is easy. It's still possible with this hex, but I think it's more natural here. You don't want Nomad or Yellow Faction, and actually especially Nomad, because the problem with Nomad is if he see you going there with his 3rd dwelling, he might decide to go here, and then this dwelling kind of loses its purpose, really. So I'd say definitely not Nomads. Fakirs can be managed maybe in some situation when you're positioning yourself after his his last dwelling. So maybe against Fakir. You don't want mermaids in. At first, I remember when I was learning the game, and even much later actually, I thought that the northeast start was kind of a counter to Mermaid, beating him to this black hex before the game even starts, because you want to counter mermaids going this way. But with experience I realized that it's actually a very risky start against mermaid, because you want, obviously, your motive to go there is to go through here and later jump here and build a town here, or maybe with this yellow. But if mermaid is in, yeah, you succeed in to beat him to this black hex, but he still has a lot of possibility to beat you either there or at least there, because usually mermaid will want to do a sanctuary town, so he might take this hex or he might take this hex. That can be true, by the way, too, with maybe less consistently, but with Swarmlings too. Difference is that for Swarmlings he will want these two hacks only if he do a 4 structure town here, while Mermaid may want just this X to do a sanctuary town with these 3 hexes. So Mermaid definitely more dangerous. So yeah, it doesn't work that well against Mermaid. So what's the purpose then of starting here? It will be mainly, I think, an anti-witches positioning, because often witches or Oren will try to go this way to do a town with these 4 hexes, and starting here, it's way to beat them there, and witches won't threat any of these other hexes later on. So as a counter to witches, it's an interesting strategy. So yeah, the idea often is to be able to do one town here, and one town here, and have an easy connection with these 2 hexes. So if you can do that, if you can have a town here, have a town here, have a town here, connect with only one, then it can become a very, very powerful starting spot. But again, it's kind of niche, to start there. It's kind of very specific. It's a way to break Witch's plan, mainly. So next we can consider the south and east start, so where you start one dwelling in the east, then I think you don't really have choice. To make sense of the south and east start, it will be almost always, so the south and east start, it will be almost always this hex that you will start on, and you start one here. So what kind of setup do you want to do this? That will be when, I'd say, Nomad is not there, because if Nomad is there, I think the split start is almost always better. However, you have Mermaid in, so the troublemaker. They kind of prevent the center start. So as you see, like I consider the south and east start. It's really not a main opening. It's something that you do when other options are closed. And I would say it's the same with the all-east start that we considered. And the southeast start, to me, is kind of an alternative to the 2-east start. It's in the same, you'll do it in the same condition, but more specifically when... So yeah, you can... Both of these dwellings are blocked because mermaids are in. Both of these starting spots are blocked because mermaids are in, and this starting spot too. But if mermaids is there and cultist is there, and you have a kind of opening where you put your first dwelling here, and then it's cultist turn, and he put his 2 dwellings there and there, then you still can do the all-east start, but very interesting in this circumstance might be to try the southeast start, because the idea is that you're really blocking cultists this way. Usually cultists will go down here to connect and make a town here, maybe a town with all these actually. So you're blocking this ID straight up. You'll be able to connect through here. And you have a town here, and then maybe you can have some shipping and go west later. But the main idea will be to take these 4 hex here and these 3-1 there. The only thing here is that you have to make sure that someone will come here. So maybe if say there's gray, green, and brown in the game, you could consider doing something like that. I think I will still prefer do the center start and go all the way up there. But as an alternative, because you're sure, the reason why I say green and gray is because if both green and gray are in the game, you're sure that this hex will be taken sooner or later. And that's really the key, because if you want, the problem with here is the question of whether you'll have neighbor to do a town. So often gray will take this hex, but it then can take a lot of time, and some game you just will not, so it's kind of more risky. But if you have like some good indication that you'll be able to have a neighbor here, it can be interesting. Actually, I remember a game where I started here and Mermaid was in, so like in this setup, and Mermaid actually started here. And although it might seem like a bad thing because you lose your easy X to dig in the south, it ended up being good because I could do my sanctuary here and take these two hex easily. That didn't interest Mermaid at all, and do a town here without any problem. So it was much better actually to have Mermaid as a neighbor early on here than not having any neighbor for the whole game. So yeah, even if Mermaids start here, this is not a bad idea at all, and actually it can be even something to consider. I mean, if Mermaid commits putting one of his dwelling here, suppose he does. I've seen one player do this lately in Division 1 actually of the tournament. I think it was Menpenzi. So starting one of his dwelling here and one of his dwelling here, I will be very tempted as Darklings to start here actually. Doing the sanctuary here and blocking cultists this way, planning to do this little town here. I think it's a much better option than starting here, and probably still better than the start. So yeah, in the very specific circumstances, the southeast start might be interesting. So for the sake of completion, let's consider now the no east start, where you decide to put none of your dwellings on the east island. Usually you'll have a dwelling here and a dwelling here. Usually you will do that in a position where there's no gray faction, and probably no green faction either, or there's green faction but he started both of his dwelling center or something, and you feel that he won't have any neighbor for too long on the east island, so you decide to go for no east start. Nomad fakirs will be again important in this decision, because if C1 is making, so this X, if it's making any sense, it's because you have a neighbor here. So I would say they are kind of prerequisite. And then it means that you have to be able to do sanctuary in the center. So and either go this way or this way, just as in the split start. In some circumstances, I would say if nomad are not in, if it's fakirs, you might consider doing the kind of mix of the split start and the northeast start, going here and here. So I see no nomad again, because if you start here and there's nomad, he will probably put his third, or at least he may put his third dwelling here, which is really bad for you. So maybe in some kind of circumstances it could be interesting to do this kind of opening, say if it's swarmlings and witches or something like that, with fakirs. Maybe you can do something like that, but I think it's very, very niche. I mention it because Unda pointed out to me that this could be a possibility, so for being true out, I think you can point it out, but most of the time the no east start will be with these two hexes. I would say that's very inferior than putting a dwelling on the east if you think you have any neighbor there, whether it is giants, witches, or NG, and even if they don't come there in round one, very, very most of the time you'll prefer to have dwelling in the east. But in some circumstances you can play this just in the west, and then then it will mean trying to get a town here, maybe go south here for another town, maybe here. So kind of more different playstyle than what we'll see. However, I don't want to talk too much about it because it's not too common that you'll go for this. Okay, so that pretty much concludes this section on starting spots. So just to wrap things up a little, you almost always want one dwelling in the east, so that's almost a given. But usually you prefer to have only one because you can use the free hex that you have in this circumstance, and also the extra space that give you a more spread start. If yellow is in and swarmling isn't, you almost always will want to do the split start, so one east and one here, and then for the rest kind of exploit what other opportunity you have. If you have the opportunity to do a town from this spot, so either these two hexes are available, you'll want to do the middle start. If both of these hexes are available, or if you're able to climb this way, then you want to do the middle start. And finally, if both of these options are not viable, or if witches is in the game and you're really afraid that he will take this, you might go for the northeast start with one dwelling there and one dwelling there. Finally, so that's if blue is not in the game, though, because if blue is in the game, he risks blocking you there and there. So, but if blue is in the game, then you probably blue is in the game and yellow isn't, and you don't have the opportunity to do your town here. Then you may go for the east start, with also the possible alternative to do a southeast start if brown is in the game and you want to block him and you expect to have company here. Just as a conclusion, you have here to see all the different movement that are kind of typical of Darklings. Depending on which of these movements you're trying to secure and which you think is going to be more successful, it will kind of determine what decision you will take to where you start. All of these movements kind of correspond, you'll see, to different town spots that Darklings can pursue. And that's again an advantage of Darklings, because they can dig so easily, they can produce so many spades, often they don't need so much shipping, and they will start digging straight for their town spots. And just to show a little bit about these town spots, I don't want to spend too much time because it's pretty much the same than the Alchemist town spot. So if you want to see more about town spots, you can check the Ultimate Guide to Alchemist video. Maybe different, sometimes Darklings will do a town around here, often with the Stronghold actually. So it takes a triple dig, but that's the kind of thing that Darklings can afford. Often it will be your third town in an all-east start, for example. You will end up, since maybe some other faction already is here, you'll end up like taking this as a fourth spot, so that's a possibility. And again, these town spots really depends on, that's one thing too that kind of determine your starting spot. So which of these town spots are available considering which factions are in play. Alright, so that concludes this section on starting spot. Hope again it was instructive. For next video, so for part 3, we'll start to tackle the real strategic issue of Darklings and consider how you will build your plan when playing Darklings. So this will be really the core of your strategic contents. Probably we'll have time to do these three next slides, hopefully the 3 next sections. Yeah, so that will be really the core on how to play Darklings. So hope you had fun with the video, and I'll see you next time. Bye.